The Assassin's Creed series takes players through many interesting and dangerous times in history. The game's creator, Ubisoft, stresses the game's historical accuracy, but is this game really close to the actual history? Let's find out. Assassin's Creed followed an assassin's guild, originally from 11th century Syria and Persia, who carried out assassinations during the Crusades disguised as merchants and or ascetics. The guild was a silent force in history until the late 1300s, when the assassins' fearful image and deadly reputation threatened the Mongols. This resulted in the slaughter of all the Nazaris the Mongols could find, all but destroying the ancient guild. The Knights Templar, the antagonist of the series, was an order of monastic knights created to defend Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. After they failed to win the First Crusade, the order was in drastic decline until it was ultimately destroyed by King Philip IV in order to avoid repaying the debt he owed the order. Now let's jump to the 18th century, where the supposed assassins fought the Knights Order in the American Revolution. History tells us that this isn't a possibility due to the destruction in the 14th century, almost 400 years before the events of the American Revolution. Today in history, the Sons of Liberty are seen as the great men who founded this country on the principles of perfection. In fact, our society has portrayed these men as gods who did not have an ounce of wrong in their body. The reality is, most of these men's real beliefs can be incredibly offensive. The game accurately depicts most of these men's hidden offenses. For example, in many of Benjamin Franklin's letters, he is noted as being incredibly sexist, going as far as to say having affairs with older women is far more exciting and fun. Franklin views women as property, and in this scene, the game nails his ideas.
First and most obvious, they're wiser. And so this makes for far more stimulating conversation. Makes other things more stimulating as well, but more on that in a moment.
Another one of America's great gods, George Washington, is portrayed in the game as indecisive and contemplative. In history, George Washington has been plagued with making rash, indecisive decisions that were eventually overcome with perseverance and determination. In the scene where the supplies go missing, George Washington seems confused until Connor Kenway, the protagonist, volunteers to retrieve the supplies. This accurately depicts his real-life interpretation. In the beginning of the game, protagonist Connor Kenway's village is burned down by a group led by the infamous Charles Lee. The native's motives from then on forward is to earn revenge for slaughtering his tribe, and more importantly, his mother. But after meeting Achilles, Connor's mentor, Connor becomes a pretentious anarchist follower of the founders, and believes in America as a nation. During this time period, the Indians resented the colonists due to their racism and constant forced western movement. They would not have believed that if the colonists won the war, all their problems would be solved, much like Connor believes in the game. If this game was truly historically accurate, Connor would have joined forces with the British Templars to defeat the romantic American idea that would soon lead to western expansion and manifest destiny. In the downloadable content, The Tyranny of King Washington, George Washington becomes the king. Protagonist, Connor Kenway, hopelessly attempts to reclaim the idea of a kingless society. This alternate piece of fiction brings a single question. Could Washington have actually become king of the United States? Many stories were told of the great George Washington in history, some true, some false. One of the most valiant acts was when George Washington rejected the crown. Months after the Revolutionary War, Washington was presented a letter from Colonel Louis Nicola, asking him to accept the American crown. George Washington's response was something out of a storybook. He wrote, "No man possesses a more serious wish to see implied justice done to the army than I do, and, as for my power and influence will permit, in a constitutional way." So in theory, George Washington could have accepted a role the American colonists fought so hard to get rid of. Due to the valiant act of Washington, we have a government and the freedom we share today.